Welcome back to the Starborn Parenting Podcast. I'm Rick Cabina.
And I'm Madeline Jurgensen.
Madeline, I have a question for you. Have you ever used a token economy either at home or in your time when you were working as a behavior analyst?
So many times. So many times. I can't even count that.
Yeah.
What about you?
My very first job when I became a behavior analyst, I had to learn how to use a token economy for an entire at this facility that I was at. We had adults and we had children, and I had to teach this for the entire group, which was probably kids. We probably had 30, 35 kids, and adults, there were probably another 30 or 35. So this massive group, it was something else. And I have to tell you, these token economies are incredible, incredibly powerful. And I feel it's something that parents should know about.
Oh, yeah. And you can cater them to children's age, developmental level. They're super useful.
The thing about token economies, we'll talk about them in much detail, but there's really four things that you got to know. Number one, what is it? And here's a spoiler alert. If you understand how to use money and the principles behind it, you can understand what a token economy is. Is it a bribe or is it a reward? That's something else that we need to talk about when we discuss token economies. How do you build it? It's pretty simple when you understand what the principles are and what the technique is behind it. You do have to know the principles of it, but if you're going to do these things like anything else with behavior science, and people are doing these things, they just might not recognize what they're doing as part of behavior science. But how do you get good at it? How do you have good timing? And then what are mistakes that would make this system not as effective as it could be? So those are the things that we're going to talk about today. And I'll start off by explaining, what is a token economy in very simple terms. Token economy is some kind of symbol. That symbol could be whatever you think it could be. It could be a poker chip. That symbol could be a sticker, which, again, many people think sticker charts, they automatically think it's a token economy, but we'll talk about that later. But a physical sticker could be a star on the wall, a tally mark. If it's something digital, you could, whatever that digital thing is, it should be consistent and it should represent, you'd be using this with the behavior that you want, and the child or whoever is using this is going to turn in that token to something later. Let me ask you this. When you used a token economy, do you remember what the actual tokens were when you were using those systems?
Sometimes, yes. I mean, one I'll tell a story later was like a kind of a mint. I've used chips. I've
Yep.
used little pieces of paper, just because that's what we had on hand at the moment. We've used the most fancy one was like, what was it called? Mario. Like it was little Mario stickers, kind of. These little like personalized chips
Okay.
we made. Yeah, Mario and
Yeah.
Luigi. That's probably the most fancy we got. But sometimes they're just super simple marks on a page, check
Yeah.
marks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We used points, and we had these sheets of paper, and what was different about the point system is, we're talking right now token economy 101. Token, this happens for this thing. But what we did is, we were a little bit more advanced, is we would give points. So this behavior could be 1,000 points, or this behavior could be 2,000 points. And that was a little bit more elaborate, but nevertheless, it's the same thing. If you're writing 1,000 points, that means nothing if you think about what that is. But this is the second part of the token economy. The real value is you are exchanging those points, those pieces of paper, or if it's a mint, that could be something in and of itself that has value. These things are going to be earned, and you are getting value. And really, the cleanest analogy is a dollar bill or any
Mhm.
of the money that we use. If you went to another country or if someone, well, let's just say someone gave you Monopoly money, you know that that Monopoly money outside of playing the game of Monopoly has zero value. Like, you can't do anything with it. Sure, maybe you're a child and you can pretend that it's something in a play situation, but it doesn't have any value because there's nothing that backs it up. But with money, and when we get paychecks and when people get, well, however they're paid, that has real value in its exchange. And essentially, those are the components that make up a token economy.
Yeah, and you touched on this with money because these token economies isn't just something clinical that we kind of like stays in the clinical world, but we experience these all the time. As you point out, rightly so, money is a big token economy. Ones are loyalty punch cards. If you eat
Yeah.
10 pizzas, you get the 10th one free or the 11th one free, as my dad always likes to go to.
Hey, don't laugh at
Frequent.
that. I'm sure maybe you do remember this, but back in the day with Subway, I used to love Subway.
Oh
You
yeah.
would get these little cards and they would give you a sticker. Do you remember this? Or maybe that was
I
just,
do. I do. I wasn't a huge
yes.
Subway fan, but I do know about this. Yes.
I loved it. I would love those, and I became loyal to Subway because if I ate X amount of things, I would turn my car in, I'd get a free sub. I mean,
Hmm.
my behavior is being controlled by the token economy. So that, that punch card really resonates with me personally.
Yeah, there's a pizza place in Wisconsin. My dad's gonna kill me for not being able to say the name because I can't shout them out right now. But they have like magnet pieces that are like slices of pizza. So when you build, you
Yeah.
get a magnet piece and you can build a whole pizza. And when you build the whole pizza, you bring it in and you get a whole pizza. So
That
that was like
is cool.
when we visited our family in Wisconsin, it was like my dad had to go to the pizza place because we had to continue building our pizza.
Oh, I love that.
But yeah, so those are the things.
Yeah, they work.
And
Yeah, frequent flyer miles.
yeah.
I love frequent flyer miles. And again, that's a token economy. There's so many, when you think about these behavioral principles that we're talking about, they're throughout our society. It's just that, as we're talking about these things and we're saying, hey, if you're a parent, this is how you could use it. A lot of people just don't recognize what are the behavioral principles behind these things that are always running. And yeah, those are really good examples that you
Mhm.
gave.
And now that I think about it, Rick, you're actually you're all about the loyalty programs. I know a couple
Yeah,
loyalty programs. You're real loyal about it.
I am absolutely loyal. And because you know me, you know how these people can reel me in.
Oh, I know. When we go places for conferences, we have to be very picky about where we go, what locations we can stay at, because then otherwise
That's
Rick
right.
and I will be like 45 minutes apart from each other because he has to go to his loyalty hotel.
It has to be a Marriott. I am brand loyal to Marriott, and I will admit that publicly. Every year I stay and I travel so much, I become this, I don't even know what it's called, like an elite, whatever. So they give me a fancy name. They give you all these perks. But yeah, I am controlled by that, and I'm not ashamed to admit it.
Yeah, and the behavioral magic about these whole token economies is the timing. So like tokens, they
Yes.
have to be marked by the second that it happens. So like the second
Yes.
you book your miles, book your hotel, you get those. The second you do something that's on your sticker chart or whatever, then you get that sticker immediately. It's the timing so that you get the token immediately after the behavior happens, so that you can really draw that association between the behavior itself and the token.
That's such a good point. This is where the skill comes in. And we can talk about that now and later. But if that timing doesn't work, then your token economy is not going to work. And as we talk about building the token economy, you have to have the timing. So that's a fabulous point. I'd like to point out that this is established science. It's deep science. I remember reading a book when I was a grad student, and this was a book that talked about token economies, and like they were built back in the 60s. And some 60 years later, people still across classrooms, homes, clinics, businesses, everyone's using these token economies. And uh, some of this went back to like literally the 30s. There were these researchers that gave these chimpanzees they were like poker chips. And these poker chips could be dropped into this like vending machine contraptions. And these chimpanzees would then get grapes. And the chimps, what was amazing about this discovery back in the 30s is the chimps would work just as hard for these poker chips than they would for the real food. And when you start thinking about that, like, whoa, that really shows you the power of the behavioral principles that are at play. Because a poker chip by itself, like if you just went to your dog and started flashing a poker chip around your dog's just going to look at you funny, and maybe it'll lick the poker chip or lick your hand because it likes you, but it doesn't have any value. But when these things become paired, as in this study that they showed, which was paired with these grapes, what these chimps loved, then it had worth. And, they followed this up with other different kinds of tokens. And through time, it was just discovered that token economies work on these behavioral principles, and some of the discoveries were when you do this, you're making a promise. And if you get a token and you don't get to cash it in, that creates all sorts of trouble. And they found that out in this research that these animals would get super upset when they didn't. And it would be like us. You work all week and all of a sudden your employer doesn't give you your paycheck. You're not going to take very kindly to that. And that's what we see in this early research. So the principle behind tokens, as I said, they're established science.
Hmm. I love any chimpanzee or monkey behavioral analysis research. They're so fascinating.
Yeah.
So one of the things we want to talk about too is like the difference between bribe and reward. So these are
Yes.
questions that we get asked by a lot from parents. It's like, isn't this just bribery? And it's not, but you can be if you get it backwards. So the idea is that rewards come after the behavior you want. So if say you started homework on your own, here's a token. Great use. But if the kid is throwing a tantrum and you start saying, if you please stop throwing a tantrum or screaming and I'll give you a treat or I'll give you a token, that becomes more of a bribe because you're giving the token conversation during the middle of the tantrum. So then the kid learns that if they start screaming, they're going to get a treat because you're going to give the treat in an attempt to stop the screaming. So you never want to talk about tokens or try to refrain from talking about tokens when your kid is doing things that you don't want them to do because you're just going to increase that behavior. So instead, you want to save all that token talk for times when they're doing something right. Like, like I said, the kid's doing their homework where the kid says something nice to his sister and you say, "Great job saying something nice, being nice to your sister, saying thank you. Here's your token."
Yeah. Boy, you said a couple things there that are just so important that if you're using tokens, you must focus in on that wisdom that you just shared. And reinforcing what you said, we've talked a lot about rewards. It is a fundamental principle of behavior. Behavior that's rewarded is going to happen more often in the future.
Mhm.
And that fundamental premise of behavior science drives its consequences. This is one of the key findings in our field. And uh, it's very understandable for a parent who's just learning about behavior science to say, whoa, wait a minute. I don't want to be bribing my kid. Bribes are not a good parenting technique. And understanding the difference, as you pointed out, is really important. And yes, we're not advocating that parents bribe their kids. That's not a good way to raise kids. Bribery in general doesn't have any clinical evidence to it, whereas rewards has lots of clinical evidence
Mhm.
to it. And using these tokens is a way to help show the person that, yes, you can use praise, as we'll talk about, but this token is something that they have and they can see it and they can turn it in later. And that's really an important point. And I wanted to emphasize what you just said and just note how important that is. Second thing I would also uh, like to echo is when you talked about you're in a crisis situation.
Hmm.
You don't want to be using tokens at that point. And you know what else you don't want to do? And I can tell you, I've seen this happen with tokens in staff, and maybe you've seen something like this. The staff, maybe they're not very well behaviorally trained, so you teach them in a clinical situation how to use these tokens. And it's powerful. Children will work very hard for tokens. And you know what the
Hmm.
staff do when the kids are being bad? Or what, again, this is what they would say, the kid's misbehaving. I'm going to take that token away from you if you don't stop doing X.
Mm-mm.
No. Terrible thing to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. My husband almost I mentioned this in the other episode. My husband almost did that with our charts for my daughter was going to the where we were teaching her how to go to the bathroom, and she was like, "Well, we can just take it away." I'm like, "No, no, 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 don't do that. Don't say that." Like, reel it in. Side conversation, sidebar.
Yeah, yeah. It's sometimes you make these mistakes in the heat of the moment. I know I have. Like, no one's perfect. You can
Mm-hmm.
only do the best that you can do. And with your behavior science, if you understand what it is, even if you understand the rules, things happen where maybe it's a heated moment and you got hurt. Maybe the kid accidentally was throwing a tantrum and you're really mad. Like, things can happen in the heat of the moment, but understanding and giving yourself grace that if you do make a mistake, that it's okay. Just don't do it again. And with these tokens beyond, you're talking about some issues of, well, would they want to use tokens? Another issue that comes up is, if you use tokens, is this something that's going to kill their motivation? And I won't go into the research. We have so much research behind token economies. There are some people out there, and let's just call this out right now, so that when parents start reading more about behavior science, they understand that there's people like this out there. There are people that don't like behavior science, and there are people that will say, "Oh, well, in this study over here, it showed that rewards don't work." And when you start looking at these people, they have a very clear agenda. They're writing books, maybe they're supporting some other approach, and they are gonna denigrate people that are already doing successful things, and you get this, that, they'll say, "Oh, well, here's a research study that shows that token economies will kill motivation." If you look at those studies, there are reasons why those are flawed and are coming up, and you have misinterpretations. We see that when children earn tokens, like maybe they're doing math, their interest in doing math on their own is held up.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't collapse even when you start taking these tokens away. So this idea that you're using tokens and it's somehow going to subvert someone's motivation, it just doesn't hold up to the information that's already out there.
Yeah, you made a really good point about that, they don't lose their interest just because you have are giving the tokens. And it made me think about like I also really like token economies, especially for parents, because it helps parents also cue in to their child's behaviors and look for things that they want to see increase. And so, with the token, the kids also get praise, attention from the
Yeah.
parents. And that's honestly what most kids really like. Like the most kids just really like when their parents are proud of them, happy for them, excited for them. So token economy is almost like a special way to create additional bonds with parents and kids.
Yes. Imagine you have a child and you give them a token and you say, "You did such a great job cleaning up after dinner." And you're
Mhm.
pairing that that warm phrase, the smile, the genuine intent you're putting in that, and the child has this token, they receive a token. Behavior science is about using these to help form these strong relationships between parents and their children. And that absolutely happens. And at some point, those tokens will be faded. And yet, you being warm and you giving the praise, that's still going to be able to maintain their behavior. So, that's a really good point.
Mhm. All right, so let's talk about how we actually build these. What are
Yeah.
kind of like the four decisions that we want to keep in mind when we're building one of these token economies?
Yeah. Let me start off by recommending if you're new to token economy, this is the first time you're using it, don't pick 100 behaviors. Start off with 3 or maybe 4. If you pick a few target behaviors, then that's going to allow you to do many things at once. It's going to help you work on your delivery, as we've already mentioned a few times. When you provide a token, you need to do that token immediately after the behavior that has happened. And if you're trying to remember, okay, wait a minute, does this behavior earn a token or doesn't this behavior earn a token? Juggling all of this other information while you're still trying to be good at using these token economies makes it challenging. So the very first thing that I would say is just pick, 1, 2, 3. Let's just stop there. Let's just start with 1 to 3.
Mhm.
Make that your max. And if you go from there, you can't go wrong because you can then also know that these are the behaviors my child's going to earn. It'll be clear to them. It'll be clear to you.
Mhm.
So I would start right there.
Okay. And making sure that those behaviors are observable, right? Like, because it's like just being good or something, or like be good, don't be bad would be a terrible token economy. Like you want
Yeah.
to be something really specific. Like I want backpack by the door packed by 7 a.m. Or I want say thank you after someone gives you something, something like very specific. So that then the child, and it's clear to everybody what behaviors count as tokens and what behaviors do not count as tokens.
Yeah. You and I have done research on pinpoints. That also happens to be in that great book called Why Your Child Does That or Why Your Kid Does That.
Mhm.
And pinpointing a behavior says very specifically, this is the behavior that I want to work with. And as parents, if they are able to understand that this is the thing that is going to receive a token, that's going to make life much easier for them and the child because something that is very large and requires lots of behaviors or something that is unclear, that's going to be challenging. So being able to look at those specific behaviors are important. I would add a third component to when you're picking these behaviors. Yes, we want to have 1 to 3 max. Yes, we want them to be observable, but pick growth behaviors. Remember
Mm-hmm.
when we talked about that back in episode 6? There's
Yeah.
behaviors we want to grow, and then there's behaviors that we want to reduce. Picking behaviors that we want to be in that category of growth behaviors is going to be helpful because you want them to go up, and guess what tokens do? They are rewarding a behavior, and that behavior is going to occur more. There's going to be a higher likelihood that it occurs in the future. So pick growth behaviors.
Yeah, that's such a good point to mention the growth behaviors. I remember sitting across from these parents that I was working with, and we had talked about starting a token economy. And for their homework that week, they had to make a list of behaviors that they wanted the kid, the behaviors for the token economy. And I thought as a new BCB, I had done a good job explaining what the task was. When I came back, they gave me this list, and it was just a laundry list of everything the kids shouldn't do. Like, don't hit your sister, don't come to the table late, like
Yes.
don't do this. And I was like, and I was reading this, I was like, what is your kid supposed to do? It reminded me of those, the posters you might see at beach boardwalks. It's like, don't roller skate, don't walk, don't run, don't they? And you're like, well, what are we supposed to do? And it's like,
Right.
we like to think that our kids can come up with these ourselves, but the fact that the parent had difficulty thinking of things that the child should do makes, you would imagine that the kid is also having a difficult time figuring out what they can do.
Yes. That's a solid point. So pick growth behaviors and don't try to stamp everything out. These annoying behaviors. Being humans, especially kids trying to figure things out, uh, the positive relationship is going to develop more as you're providing these tokens for behaviors you want to grow. And we're not saying give your kids free rein. Let them just do whatever they want to do. If you're smart about things, you can actually target a growth behavior that would be incompatible with
Mhm.
these things that you don't want them doing. For example, let's say that you want to go to a restaurant and your kids love this whatever maybe it's some burger joint, and they run up to the counter. If you gave them a token for, we're going to calmly walk to the front of the line or stand in line or whatever it is calmly, you can reward that behavior. And by virtue of you rewarding that, then they're not going to be running to the front. And
Mhm.
that's a little clever use of behavioral engineering that you can do.
Yep. Yeah, we do that all the time. My daughter, we actually just did that today because she was sitting, we had this like plastic box that keeps all like extra clothes in, and she was trying to sit on top of it, but it's very flimsy. And so I was like, don't sit on the box. And then I immediately was like, boy, you can sit over here. And I, pointed at her new cushiony chair thing that well, not new, it's like this like foam block. And she sat in that. She was very happy. And it's like, yeah, I think it's like if you give your kid a lot of growth behaviors, they don't really have space or time to do a lot of the behaviors you don't want to see because they're just
Yeah.
doing a bunch of things you do want to see, which is good.
Yes.
But yeah, so the other one is like how to choose your tokens. So now we talked about like picking your behaviors. Now, when you choose your tokens, you can do pretty much anything that's countable. So stickers,
Yeah.
poker chips, marbles, as long as there aren't like younger kids around, marks on a page, notebooks, stickers. There's one thing I do have to note with stickers or any of these items is you want to make them almost as plain as possible, very simple things, because you don't want like, oh, I don't want this token, I want this one. I don't want this sticker, I want this sticker.
Yeah.
You don't want them to have to like pick a lot and make decisions
Right.
about it. It's just the token is just sort of getting them to the reinforcer that they want at the end. So it sometimes the simpler ones are the better.
Yeah, that's a good point. If the tokens are something that are going to create a problem either in the delivery of giving these tokens or wherever you're keeping these tokens, that can be a problem. So
Mm.
having something that's reliable, the token almost doesn't matter in the sense that whether it's a star, whether it's you writing something, you giving something physical, or if it's something digital, maybe you have an iPad and you touch a button and there's a star or there's whatever it is, that's all fine. It's the delivery and being able to exchange this for reward. That's the magic here.
Hmm. And storing them. You mentioned that briefly, and what you just said is that like you want a place to put them. I'm not just going to give the kid a token and they're going to run around the house and lose it, or like you want a place for them to store these tokens after you give them. And letting the kids place the tokens themselves. That's something that we do a lot in precision teaching. Is like kids make their own marks, and so if you have like a board that you can place it on, or a tablet that you're running the token economy in, having the kids actually select the tokens themselves, place them on the board. That really gives them ownership
Yeah.
and shows them that cause and effects between the behavior that they did and the token that they're receiving.
Yes. Guess I'd also point out when you think about tokens and choosing them, you need to be age specific. And if you have a young child, maybe they are in love with Thomas the Train. But if you're doing this with teenagers or younger kids, they might not really be turned on by Thomas the Trainer. They might feel infantilized. So make sure that whatever you're choosing is something that is age appropriate.
Hmm. Yeah, really good point.
Another point would be, okay, we talked about pick 1 to 3 targets. How do you pick those? What are some important things? Choosing your tokens, that's number 2. The third thing would be having a reward menu and setting the prices. This is where you know your child better than anybody else. You have to come up with a way, a menu of different items that your child will want to work for, and they have to be graded. Let's say that you have, maybe you're in 5 tokens and there's this little plastic toy that's, oh, okay, that's nice, and maybe that's worth 5 tokens. But if you have maybe a slice of paper that says, you've earned, a trip to Dairy Queen. If you put a price on that for 5 tokens, then you're going to be making a lot of trips out to Dairy Queen. You have bigger ticket items and smaller ticket items, and as children are working, they're earning these tokens through their behavior. I guess you can call that work in the sense. They are earning this through their behavior, and when they go to exchange this, you have to have the reward menu. So the reward menu have to be things that they want, and it has to be like a fair exchange of this is the amount of behaviors you worked on, and this is the reward that you are exchanging it for.
Do you think that's something you could bring the kids into, like
You could,
discussion, like
absolutely.
depending on the age? I think that's a good opportunity to get that social buy-in with the kids. Is like, okay, what do you think is fair? What do you want in the store, in their token store? And then if you see the kids like maybe not getting interested anymore, maybe refreshing the store, getting new items, new ideas, all good.
Yeah, I love that idea. Everything we can do to help the children have ownership is going to be positive and make this thing happen and make it run smoother. I guess if I were going to have a caveat here, it would be that reward has to be earned. If a reward is not earned, well, let me say it this way. If there are some things that are available for free, why would someone earn it? Think about money. If you just give your child $5, and then on the other hand, you're like, hey, uh, every Friday they get $5, and then you say, hey, if you clean your room, you can get $5. Well, if they already have $5, why work for it when you're just going to get it for free anyways? And this can happen in all sorts of ways with the availability of something being freely available, and then all of a sudden that token economy not working very well.
hmm Yeah, I told you earlier there was a girl and that I worked with, and we had this fabulous token economy running. She was like earn these tokens to get a little piece of candy at the end. Well, she could select from a whole thing, but one of her favorite reinforcers to select at the end was just like this little piece of candy. And then suddenly one day her behaviors were increasing, the token board wasn't working, and we found out that when her grandma picked her up, like the week before, she had realized that this granddaughter really liked these little candies, and being a sweet grandmother that she was, went out and bought a giant bag of these candies, and she'd just been giving
Oh
handfuls to
no,
this girl at
grandma.
home. And so of course, like there goes all the reinforcement to or motivation for our token economy, because she was like, I don't need to do XYZ. I can get candies for my grandmother at home.
Yeah, that's a great story.
Yeah, so that's also good is like if you're doing these token economies and there's specific reinforces the kids are working for, talking across your care team, like teachers, grandparents,
Yep.
friends, and trying to decrease the availability of those reinforcers so that the child can only access them through the store. So one example is also Trader Joe's loves to give out stickers. If stickers is something their kids working towards, maybe getting 15 billion stickers every time they go to Trader Joe's is not going to be helpful.
Yeah. Yep.
No hate on Trader Joe's. We love your stickers. Please keep giving them to us.
Yes.
All right. So then the next decision we want to talk about is deciding when to cash them in. So this is kind of a discussion point, is that this can be something where you cash in the tokens at the end of the day. This is maybe for younger kids or, kids that have difficulty waiting, or maybe they're new to token boards and they need to see that reinforcement earlier. You can also do a weekly store. So some kids who can wait a little bit longer, maybe they're a little bit older, can wait until the end of the week to cash it in. Or maybe you do this like every Sunday as a family, you cash in your points. But this is something that you want to discuss early on and then make that a thing.
Yeah. This can be a wholesome activity. You
hmm
have behavior that you are saying very explicitly, these are things we want more of. And you are earning this token with your behavior. And the exchange almost becomes the ceremony of celebration. You did great. You did great. And now pick this, from this menu and just celebrating that. And that's the great thing about token economies is the children earned it through their
hmm
behavior. And this token economy becomes very powerful and can be used in all sorts of ways. So if you follow these 4 rules, then you're off and running. And I guess I would say the 2 big things to remember here beyond these 4 is always deliver that token immediately. Don't wait 5 minutes or an hour. Just like any reward, you have to deliver that immediately because that's forming the connection of behavior, reward. That happens more likely in the future. And then the other thing I would point on is having the parent always have some specific praise that they're adding with the token, because now what you're doing is you're pairing, number one, you're teaching the child that what am I getting this token for? Even though it might seem obvious, you further saying that with your words is helping solidify what the child did and them understanding what they did. And it's also helping you become, when you pair that token and you give that praise, you are becoming positive. You're becoming even more positive. Your praise is becoming more positive. Okay, let's take a moment and talk about parents. I see this with influencers. I just saw this morning as I was scrolling through my Insta. And this influencer was saying, "Oh, sticker charts don't work. Try blah, blah, blah." And I was like, "Oh, that just bugs me when people beat up on sticker charts," because what they're really saying is behavioral principles and token economies don't work. But sticker charts are not synonymous with a token economy. And here's a very simple reason why these don't work. And this goes back to the science that you and I were just explaining. If there's free access for something, then your token is not going to be robust enough to drive behavior forward because they're already getting whatever that free thing is. I mean, this is a classic killer to token economies. If you get an afternoon school snack and that becomes a thing that the child is working for, but yet, before the child became home, maybe they went to their friend's house and already got a snack. So that diminishes this,
Mm-hmm.
and they're not likely going to work for this thing that they just got for free.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a very good point. The other one is if you're too stingy with your tokens. So if you make it too difficult for the kids to get their tokens, there's something we call ratio strain. So this is when
Yes.
it's too hard for them to earn it. Then it's going to decrease the motivation. So if a kid, I don't know, they have to. The payoff is too steep, so there's like a billion things that they have to do to get one token, or maybe there's the favorite thing that they want is costs 1,000 tokens and they only have one, they only get one per week. They're not gonna want to participate in this economy. I mean, same thing. I also wouldn't work 50 hours for $5. Like that's I'm not gonna you're gonna see my work
Yeah,
productivity go down.
exactly. I would also add, if that reward loses its luster, that's not going to help maintain this
Mm.
token economy. Let's say that you have the reward menu and you have the same thing on there. One of the things that I do is I like to 3D print, and I'll print off these little animals, and they're cute when you give one of them like this little dog or maybe a little articulating dragon. And any one by themselves is fine. But if I had this little dog or this articulated dragon, and every time you get to earn the same articulating dragon, it's not going to work. It's going to become boring, and the person will become satiated. Again, we
Mhm.
talked about, I don't know if we talked about satiation, but
No, we
I know I've
haven't.
written about it. But the satiation is like, you are at Thanksgiving, you've eaten one plate, you've eaten a second plate, you've eaten a third plate. You don't want a fourth plate. It's the same thing with these rewards.
Yeah, and then that also goes with the kids. You want to use up these rewards, I mean, these tokens, like pretty regularly, because what you can sometimes get is hoarders. My little brother was a hoarder with his
Yeah.
items when he was a kid, but he would
Mhm.
store these tokens and then they lose the motivation to keep working for them because they're rich. They got all the
Yes.
tokens that they could ever want. And so you want to come up with like a healthy token economy where savings are kept low. And so this means that there's regular cash ins and mandatory spend downs. So this is where like you have to spend your tokens. I mean, we kind of have this with like PTO sometimes. Like you can't roll over all your PTO. You have to roll over only a portion of it. Like there's ways for us to kind of keep our savings low. And
Yeah,
yeah, so you don't want kids to become hoarders, or otherwise motivation will decrease.
absolutely. If you are using the token economy and you start changing this into either nagging the kids, like, hey, if you don't do this, you're not going to earn your token, or you start bribing the kids with a token, like, if you do this, I'll give you a token. Those are ways to kill the system. Just don't do it.
hmm Yeah, and also the idea that these token economies aren't a forever plan. Like we don't want our kids to be earning tokens through college. You're not going to be shipping tokens to your, college age kids. It's not appropriate. It doesn't work. I mean, no, it's not. It's just not appropriate. We're not doing it. So, what you do want to do is have a plan about how to fade this out, so that then those other reinforcements, those natural reinforcements that we talked about, like praise,
Yeah.
just general warmth from your parents, social
Yeah.
praise, those are the things that kind of take the place of these tokens over time.
Yeah. There's a lot to do with tokens, and we have provided a solid beginning. In this podcast, we've laid out really important components to it. If this is something that you're interested in, visit the website or just type in token economy into your favorite LLM or just go to Google and search it. There's a lot of information out there on token economies, and it's something that I would encourage you all to use. Now, with that being said, I would like to point out that this is not a substitute for if you're dealing with some real clinical issues.
Mm.
If you have a behavior that's a safety risk, in other words, if you're in that red zone and there's some really intense behavior, something that's happening persistently and it's not changing, or we've talked about feeding and you have a child who's having some serious feeding issues, or maybe they have some severe anxiety, whatever those issues are, you should think about contacting a pediatrician or maybe contacting a board certified behavior analyst or someone who understands these principles. Tokens, they are used in serious situations, but there's all of these other things going on. So if you're just starting off learning to use these tokens, maybe don't think that that's going to fix these really severe issues, and you should separate them from the token use if it's something that's really severe and really intense.
That's a very good point. Yeah, because we ask for help when you need it. And those are situations where definitely like asking for help, getting outside resources is definitely ideal. The other point to not use a sticker chart is there's a thing in behavior analysis we always say, is it a can't do problem or a won't do problem? And if this
Ah,
is you don't want to use sticker charts for things where the child cannot physically do the action. Like if I'm teaching my daughter to swim, I'm not going to throw her into the deep end and try to give her a token when she gets to the edge. Like she can't literally swim. So it's like, it's not a motivational issue at that point. Like
yeah,
she's going to drown.
right.
But if it's a won't do where you know your child is capable of performing these behaviors and they're just not doing it, this is where in token economy, using that motivation reinforcement will be helpful. But so you always keep in mind when you're looking at these behaviors, is it a can't do or a won't do?
Yeah. Let me give anyone who is willing to participate a homework assignment. If you think this is something you'd like to use or learn more about, do this for your homework. Pick one growth behavior for your child, just one. Pick one kind of token and one reward that your child likes. Run it for a week. See what happens. Hand over that token and use that praise when the behavior happens, and let them know that as they get so many of these, they get a reward so that you can experience just the most basic use of this token economy and see how does it work.
Yeah, and if your last chart died and you died on the fridge, it's somewhere in the back of your pantry, go find it, figure out which of the 6 mistakes that we talked about was the culprit and try to fix that mistake because maybe your token economy wasn't dead. Maybe you don't need a whole new one. Maybe you just need a small repair.
Very good. Very good wisdom there. Well, that brings us to the end of our show. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you all for helping us build better humans.
We'll see you next week.